Hello everyone and welcome to Felix's Space Time. In today's video, I've got an interview with Sarah Gillis, the Polaris Dawn Mission Specialist. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on here for an interview today. For those who might not know you or familiar with your role on the Polaris mission, could you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Gillis. I am both a space operations engineer at SpaceX as well as one of the mission specialists on the recent Polaris Dawn mission. For that was primarily focused on science and research, kind of executing stuff on orbit, and then additionally supporting the role of EV2 during the spacewalk.
Wonderful. You and Anna have now become the women to have travelled furthest from the Earth, a truly inspiring sort of accomplishment. How do you think this will pave the way for more female accomplishments in spaceflight?
Gosh, I think every record is really meant to be broken, and the fact that we could claim this record so easily really just means there's so much more to go do and so much more to expand. And so I'm very excited for the next woman to come and take us even farther and go back to the moon, hopefully. So I think it's really just a recognition that we have so much more to go and do.
Amazing. I asked this next question to Anna, Scott, and Jared when I talked to them a few weeks ago, and they really enjoyed it. So I'd like to ask you, could you list three pieces of training, the one you enjoyed the most, the one you found the hardest, and the one you thought was the most relevant and the most helpful?
Gosh, those are great questions. Hmm. In some ways, I think for me, they were all the same thing, or maybe around the same time, I would say. I think my favorite training was the skydiving course we did at the Air Force Academy. And it's called the Airmanship 490 course. And it's one of the only programs in the world where you go, you show up, and your first jump is solo. So you go through about 2 days of training. I would say we condensed it into about 2.5 days of training where they grill you on all sorts of procedures, operations, execution, and then the first jump from the aircraft, you're on your own and you're pulling your own ripcord. So I think that was both extremely hard for me, maybe possibly some of the hardest training we did, to your other question, but it was also the most rewarding. And it is designed to make you trust your skills, to put yourself in a real life situation where you have to respond to exactly what's in the moment with you. Um, and it was training we picked kind of in preparation for the spacewalk of knowing and trusting your procedures, knowing and trusting yourself, really being confident in that environment that you could succeed. So we did 5 jumps for the total of the course, which ends in kind of receiving your jump wings from the Air Force. And I would say that was probably some of my favorite training and probably the hardest training. As far as what was your wording on the third part?
The sort of the most relevant and the one you found.
The most relevant. Gosh, I think certainly that also applies in many ways to most relevant, but I would say all of the experiential training that we did was all super relevant. Hiking a mountain, for instance, we hiked Cotopaxi in Ecuador, and when you're on the mountain, you aren't necessarily feeling well. You're having altitude sickness, you're cold, you're exhausted. Like all of these things are stressors that make you not perform at your best. And what's human spaceflight is the ultimate team sport. And when you have a team of people that are going to space in a spacecraft, you're going through the adjustment to microgravity, you're going through space motion sickness, you are, for us, we were also hiking a mountain as we decrease cabin pressure. You're stacking all of these factors on top of each other. So you're not necessarily at your best. And learning how to work as a team, learning how to support each other and persevere and trust your skills and know that like as a team you can succeed. Um, that's exactly what you need to train. And so we saw that certainly in climbing a mountain. We saw that in skydiving. We saw that, frankly, in a lot of the different training activities we did. But I would say that one certainly resonates with me for most applicable.
Great. Funnily enough, the sort of the all crew sort of favorite one seems to be that skydiving. Then that was what the others said as well.
I would believe it. It was some pretty extraordinary training, honestly.
My favorite part of the whole mission was your musical performance. Could you talk a bit about that and sort of how that came to be?
Yeah, absolutely. I thank you for saying that. That's very kind. I think it's something that it's extremely near and dear to my heart. When we were even conceptualizing this mission, this program, we knew one of our technical objectives was testing out Starlink for the first time. And this Starlink technology is both, has immense terrestrial application as well as space application. And one of the realities about communication is if you can connect people, you can connect the world, you can provide access to telemedicine, to education, you can absolutely transform lives by providing access to this technology. And so, with this first demonstration, we wanted to share something with the world that really illustrated that showed what you can do through connection, what you can create, bringing people together. And so, I think we discussed a number of ideas, and it very quickly came out that I played violin, and they wanted me to play violin. And we talked about, the universal language of music and what you can do with that to cross borders, to cross language. It's something that brings people together. So I think very early on we settled on playing the violin, and then it was really just figuring out what that would actually look like. What performance would we have on the Starlink system? What could we really sign up for in the amount of time we'd have? Uh, what it would take to actually fly a violin? What music we'd play? Kind of all the pieces of it kind of came together. But I think getting to play John Williams' Ray's theme, John Williams is, you know, one of my idols in music and has created so much of the music that we love in Star Wars and in other universes. And so getting to play his music was extremely special. The memory that I have really is in the spacecraft playing to a tiny concert hall. I have three crew members that are in front of me. And so it was like this extremely intimate concert that then got shared globally, which was very, very special for me.
Yeah, and there was other people sort of accompany you throughout the video, other people playing. How did you come to connect with those people?
Yeah, so we wanted to really engage with, um, for me, it was both children and youth and music education. And so we found an organization. El Sistema is a um, both national and international organization. There are chapters all around the world. But we found El Sistema USA, and they are connected to the international organization network. And all of these programs are really working to provide equitable access to music education, provide really high quality music education for kids that might not otherwise have an opportunity. And so we worked with them to identify orchestras and music groups kind of around the world to really illustrate what they are doing and what um, how music education can transform lives all over the world. And so it was such a pleasure to get to, engage with these kids and involve them in this project. But LSM is doing incredible work. And so we wanted to pick an organization that really was transforming lives.
Yeah. The everything that goes to space has to be sort of qualified and be able to be sent off. I know some testing happened with the violin. Something didn't quite go to plan. What happened there?
Yeah, it takes a lot to qualify anything for space. And in our mission, it was particularly stringent on requirements because of the spacewalk. When you take everything to vacuum, you have to care about materials off-gassing. As they're exposed to vacuum, they start breaking down and releasing chemicals. And so we had to do all sorts of testing on the instrument to make sure it would actually be safe for us in the spacecraft. And so we had to bake it out in a thermal vacuum chamber. And we started with a demo instrument to understand even if we could fly it and see kind of after the bake out how much material had been removed and was it safe. And so we tested that first violin, it passed. Or we baked it out for a long duration, put it into kind of a material analysis test, and then it had passed. So we built a flight unit that was beautiful. It had this dragon and star on the back of it. And then when we went to test and bake out that flight unit, it unfortunately got exposed to the wrong temperature profile. And so the instrument was too badly damaged to actually fly with us. So close to the mission, maybe a month out or so, we were finding a brand new violin that we had to put through testing again. Um, so really grateful we were able to get it to flight and make sure it was safe for us through the EVA and the exposure to vacuum. But all parts of it had to be considered. Like the bow hair requires rosin to make sound, and rosin is highly volatile. So you had to account for how much rosin you can fly in the spacecraft and how much it actually takes to make sound, and all of these factors that the SpaceX team had to solve to enable it. So very grateful they took on that challenge.
And whereabouts is this violin now, the one that you took and played in space?
It's currently back with the luthier that made the violin. He's taking a look at it, making sure it's, as um, there was no damage from the space flight. And then eventually, I think maybe this spring, it will get auctioned off for St. Jude.
Amazing. Um,
Yeah.
um, you were the second person to leave the spacecraft during the EVA, and this question might be a little broad, but I'd love to get what you think. What did it make you feel? How did it make you feel, sort of both physically and mentally?
This spacewalk was this really, really cool three-dimensional experience where you have the temperature change as all the air rushes out of the spacecraft. You can almost see all the air leaving because you have panels that are fluttering with the air as it flows by, as well as a few small objects that get sucked out, and you can watch them kind of watch their path of travel as the air moves out. Um, and so at the start of the EVA, I was kind of at the displays and following along with all of our suit pressures, our cabin pressure, keeping an eye on everything that was going on. And then once Jared came back in and I was ready to go out, it really our training kicked in and took us through the entire operation where everything had been so well choreographed that you're just executing that point. You trust your procedures, you trust kind of the skills that you've built and the repetition you have in your muscle movements. And then it was my turn to go out. And for me, I really emerged in the black vastness of space. You know, the sun had just set partially during Jared's portion. And so as I stepped outside, it was truly just black. Um, One of the things NASA crew members had told us in training was to keep your world small. And that means like focus on your hands, focus on what's directly in front of you at first as you adjust, and then you can expand your worldview and kind of broaden the aperture of what you're paying attention to. And so I would say the black definitely helped with that, where I couldn't get distracted by anything. There wasn't anything visible to me aside from if I really squinted at the horizon, I could see this like faint blue line of almost the limb of the earth. But yeah, no, I think then I was just really focused. You couldn't see anything, couldn't get distracted. And so it was for me really just here to gather data. What is the next test I need to run? What is the next feedback I need to provide? But it was extremely cool to see how the suits moved and how it compared to training and, just so cool to actually, after years of preparation and years of development, to see this be inside the suit and get to test it out up there was extraordinary.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, when you were out there, sort of complete darkness, what was that like? Sort of not being able to see anything except from the spacecraft that you're on.
I think I certainly had a moment of like just the thought of we are so incredibly small up here in this immense, vast void of space. Um, but then you kind of shift your thoughts and you're like, nope, I'm here in this awesome spacesuit. It's keeping me safe. I have a job to do, and you kind of pivot your thoughts back to what's at hand. But it certainly is just this immense expanse out there. There's so much space and so little of it that we've explored.
Yeah, and these new EVA suits are equipped with a heads-up display. And when you were out there, you were reading some of that information off through the comms. What was that like having that information so easily accessible to you?
It was super helpful and really, really cool to have your kind of your insight into your own spacecraft where you have your suit pressure and temperature and the amount of oxygen, kind of how long you've been on oxygen, stuff like that. Um, it just gives you a sense of knowing what's going on in the system really easily. So if you experience a pressure change, you can like really easily understand what's going on. Know there's not something that's changed in the state of your suit. So it was such a cool technology kind of development effort that SpaceX did, where one weekend we showed up and they're like, we're considering this. And then the next weekend we showed up and there was, a prototype. And then maybe 2 weeks later we showed up and they had what looked like a final product. It was really fast development to add this.
Yeah, you've now played a development in the part of the suits that will eventually sort of take people to Mars. How does that feel, sort of being able to contribute to something so amazing? And what feedback did you give to the SpaceX team once you came back?
I would say overall that the suits performed exactly as we had expected and hoped. They were so similar to training. They really performed exactly as we had hoped. So generally, our feedback was extremely positive. I think we certainly recognize that this is the first step in the direction towards a suit that will someday hopefully walk on the surface. But I think it's really cool that this is a path SpaceX is going down to start developing suits and start thinking ahead towards that future. So I have to imagine the architecture will change many times before we're walking on the surface of the moon or Mars, but it's very cool to be one small step in that direction.
Yeah, you and the crew were able to communicate with Earth through Starlink, like you mentioned. What was it like, sort of being able to have, sort of, Polaris had an amount of connection that no other sort of space mission had had before with the ground. What was that like, sort of being able to just pick up your phone and something you mentioned you did a FaceTime to the ground. What was it like being so close to people on Earth while being so far away?
It was so special, honestly. We were SpaceX initially didn't really tell us, what the performance would be like. They were super hesitant to commit because we just didn't know. We didn't have data. And so once we got up there and it was so much better than we expected. Like it was so cool to be able to connect with our families, to FaceTime my grandma when I'm going to bed and say hi from space. Like it's extraordinary. Um, I think one of my favorite memories is just looking around the spacecraft and having all four of us on video calls with our independent families with our headphones in. And that we're all kind of floating around and showing them space. And like, it's kind of mind blowing to think that we're connecting with our loved one and our family so far away in real time. Um, but yeah, it was a really awesome addition to the mission to just have that level of connectivity with the ground. If we ran into a problem, we could just call mission control, um, get them on a video feed, show them what was going on. It was a really cool supplement to what we were doing up there.
Yeah, and you mentioned so the violin video was sort of as a test to send it over. What was that like getting that sort of? Was that the first time you'd powered up the Starlink to to send the video?
Yeah, it was I think we connected to the internet and maybe ran a speed test just to understand what performance we were looking with. And then the next thing we were sending down was those music files. So just very special to get to send music as one of the first things that is sent from space.
Yeah. Jumping back to the EVA quickly, when you were leaving the spacecraft, you noticed something wrong with the seal. What happened there? I know SpaceX said that was expected, and what other things happened during the mission that were different but were expected?
That's a great question. So with the seals, we there's two seals around the forward hatch, and we had known that there was a chance that they might bulge out a little bit. If you have any air behind the seals and you have vacuum on the front, there's a chance that they can partially pull out. So as I was moving back into the capsule, I saw a few little bulges on the seal that could indicate that they were a little bit out of their groove. And so I just pushed them back in exactly as we had trained, made sure they were all in place before actually proceeding with closing the hatch. Um, I think another example is probably actually at the start of the EVA when Jared went to open the hatch of things that we were certainly trained for, but that we pivoted to in the execution of the operation, which was as he was opening the hatch, we knew this was a possibility that the pressure from the outflow of oxygen from our suits would actually be building up in the spacecraft and then close the hatch and then continue applying pressure. So at the start of the EVA, you probably saw him pull the hatch open a few times and then wait as we saw pressure drop. And then as soon as he let it go, it would close and pressure would start building. So very quickly, we pivoted to our second strategy, which was having him manually open the hatch. And that is something we had trained for a lot and we're very prepared to do. But it's kind of the perfect example of you train so that you're prepared for those situations.
Yeah, I think that's also an example of sort of the the maneuverability of that EVA suit, being able to open that door, sort of shows how maneuverable they were. What did you think of that sort of the maneuverability of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the operation and the hardware and the spacecraft was designed to support exactly that. We needed to guarantee we could get the hatch open, we could get the hatch closed successfully. And um, us as the operators in the spacecraft are that second line of defense. SpaceX added a motor to the hatch, but it wouldn't be able to open with that much pressure on the hatch. So that's where, you have a person that's able to um, partially open the hatch, lower pressure, and then manually open it. And the suit and the whole operation was designed to make sure we had sufficient mobility in the joints we needed, and that we had the right footholds to keep us stable, and we had the right handholds to provide to apply leverage in the ways we need to. So it was very cool that we actually got to demonstrate that capability.
Oh yeah. You've got a day job at SpaceX as a senior space operations engineer. Can you talk a bit about what this role includes? And do you think that helped you during your training to sort of make it a little easier for you?
I think for me in particular, absolutely. My role at SpaceX is actually on the astronaut training team. And so, as part of my day job, up until this point, I've been training all of our crew members, both NASA and commercial, how to become astronauts, how to live in Dragon, how to work in Dragon, and how to succeed on their mission. So it was, for me, highly applicable to actually going through our training program, figuring out how to work with our crew to, bring skills together as a team to work most effectively as a team. Um, but yeah, I think I see astronaut training constantly here, and it's just very cool to now be able to bring back the context of what it's actually like to go to space. And maybe there's parts of our training we can improve and lessons I can give to future crews to help their lives be a little easier.
Yeah, amazing. My final question for you today: what are your plans for the future, and would you ever go back to space if given the opportunity?
Right now I am certainly in the process of figuring out what comes next. Want to bring as much back as I can to our training program here at SpaceX and figure out the right ways to do that. As far as going to space again, I think I absolutely would go again if the opportunity ever came up. Space is so, so cool, and 5 days doesn't seem like enough. Um, but I also think there's so many people that should go to space. The more people we can have see the Earth from that perspective, the better off I think we'll be as humanity. So I really am excited to see many more people have access to space in the future, and maybe someday I will go again.
Yeah, adding another question on here quickly. You mentioned so now you're back at that sort of astronaut training position. Now that you've been to space, how do you think that's going to help you in training future astronauts? And is there anyone else on that team who has been to space in the past?
So what's funny is astronauts, I guess the instructors for astronauts going to space, I don't know that there's ever been another instance of an instructor in that role. Like when you think of flying high performance aircraft, you usually have somebody that is the expert in that field sitting in the back seat training you. But because of how hard it, is to get to space and how rare it is, we just don't have that experience in the training side. So it's very special to be able to bring that back, be able to hopefully give a little more context to our future crews, help them, really prepare as best as they can for the environment and the unique challenges they'll face up there. Um, but yeah, I think it's just hopefully I can bring this back to the team and um, help improve what we do here for, a future where we have hundreds of people going to space on Starship. I think the whole training experience will be very different in many, maybe not many years, maybe just a few years from now. But it's very cool to look towards this future of so many more people going to space.
Yeah, that was my last question. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on here for an interview. It was amazing getting to follow along with the Polaris mission, sort of straight from the beginning all the way up to being able to see the launch. So thank you so much for sharing your love for space and your astronaut experiences with me today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Felix.
Thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time. Goodbye.